It's time to stop with the "I'm so busy." One of the things I notice in healthcare more than most environments is the busy escalation. It's like a badge of honour, you know. You might have been shipwrecked, but I'm drowned. What do you think happens when we champion busy in this way? We fairly quickly hit overwhelm. Our narrative about how busy we are feeds the beast and the cycle continues. Professor Robert Sapolsky, a Stanford neuroendocrinologist, found that people who can't distinguish between threat and non-threat have double the level of stress hormones to those who can. He believes every human action has a biological explanation. Any threat to homeostasis is met with a stress response in an attempt to regain balance. We know this is right. The challenge comes when we can't recalibrate. The stress response is designed to be transient. When we can't regain homeostatic balance, our stress hormones stay elevated. Elevated stress levels literally make you less capable. The executive function of your prefrontal cortex reduces. Memory, judgment, and impulse control all decrease. And if that wasn't enough, the areas of your brain responsible for anxiety and anger are amplified. Physiologically, we process stress in broadly the same way, so in theory, we can all build our ability to manage it emotionally. This might look a little different if you're neurodiverse, but the principles hold. The key here lies in expectation, what you planned for, if you like. Ever had one of those days? Your alarm didn't go off, or you pressed the snooze button one too many times. You're running late, you can't find stuff, you've no time for coffee, the traffic's bad, you can't park. You just know it's not going to be a great day. And often you're right, it just spirals. Why? Because you expect it to. Your brain's looking for it. You're focused on everything that goes wrong. It doesn't have to be like that, but you're in busy overwhelm mode. Every little thing is a big thing. When we allow ourselves to fall into the busy trap, we get focused on spinning plates, averting disaster, and so on. We're really reactive and not at all prepared. My nursing background is in emergency care, and I don't know if you've experienced this in your environments, but you can kind of tell what kind of a day you're going to have by who's running the shift. It doesn't really matter about workload or the challenges you face. It can be really pressured with much higher than average work, but with the right team around you, it's still a good day. But get the wrong people? Those who relish chaos or drama? It's not so good, is it? We can learn to modify our reaction to stressors to distinguish between threat and non-threat, just as Sapolsky suggests. So how do we do it? We have to plan to be busy and train for it. This isn't the same as getting mentally or physically tougher. It's not about denying ourselves mental respite if we need it. It's about removing as much uncertainty as possible. It's about preparedness. It's about moving from overwhelm to ready. Put simply, whatever comes my way, I'll handle it. Not in a macho, bring it on sort of way, but in a I'm prepared. I've planned for this sort of way. I'm going to share with you 3 ways to do this: sorting, simplifying, and stories. So let's start with sorting. Drawing on lessons from ED, if everything was an emergency, nothing would ever get sorted. So we have a system to prioritise. It's a basic triage system, which, although is famous for military use in the sorting of the injured, actually has its roots in the sorting of coffee beans and is now essential in most emergency departments. The most basic triage systems have 4 groups, often colour-coded. Red is life-threatening. This is your genuine, urgent stuff. Yellow is serious. It needs attention, but it can wait a while. Green is minor. It can wait. And black is dead. There's nothing more you can do here. When we hit overwhelm, every little thing seems red. It's all urgent, and sometimes you just paralyse yourself with too many choices, too many decisions, or you're drawn to the thing that is the most demanding, the loudest, or the most appealing, but not necessarily the most urgent. In ED, well, pretty much anywhere really, a crying toddler might be noisy and distracting, but the chances are the silent, still one is much more in need of your attention. The noisy toddler is clearly breathing and has a good airway. They're conscious, with decent circulation. They are not a red. I just want to make a point about the black category here. Obviously, when we're talking about life in ED, it's often upsetting and pretty final. In most other circumstances, the challenge for many of us is admitting the thing is dead in the first place. We can't have it, we can't impact the situation, it's done, it's out of our control. But how often do you spend your time thinking about it, chasing after it, complaining about things you simply have no control over? These are all black from a triage perspective. You have to let them go. Think for a moment about the things that you do or what makes you feel overwhelmed on a busy day. If you don't know, pause for a moment here and jot them down, and then you can start to triage them. The chances are you encounter a lot of repetitive tasks, situations and pressures, so this exercise is part of planning, part of feeling ready. The more you understand what takes you to overwhelm, the easier it becomes to manage it. If you triage everything, your decisions become easier. Is it red? If not, it can wait. None of us can do everything, but we can all do something. If you know what red is, you'll know where to focus your efforts first. Some days, red things are all you'll get done, and that's okay. Most days, you'll get to green because you won't get sidetracked. You're not wasting your energy, and you're not worrying if you've missed something more urgent. Step 2 is simplify. Once you've identified your priorities, you have to be set up for success by simplifying things. Plan for busy so you're ready when this happens. In many ways, this is about how you design your day, both in terms of your routine and your environment. So what can you do to reduce potential overwhelm? First of all, reduce the number of decisions you have to make. I know you can't stop making decisions at work, especially if you're a leader. But did you know that according to psychiatrist Dr. Lisa McLean, the average human being makes 35,000 decisions in a day. Most of these are unconscious, but they still use up processing power. Think about it. Have you ever done this? You go to the fridge, you open the door, there are several things that you could eat, and you stand there till it beeps, trying to decide what to have. Decision fatigue is real, but most of the things that we use up energy deciding about don't actually matter, and they're certainly not in the red category. Our capacity for making good decisions diminishes the more decisions we make. And for most of us, it's better in the morning or soon after waking than it is later in the day. So plan for this. Make big decisions in the morning. But also, if you know from the rhythm and routine of your work, you're likely to get busy or feel overwhelmed, prepare for it. Give yourself some structure where you can. The more choice we have, the harder it becomes to make a decision. So help yourself out here by reducing your choice. When you look at high-performing people, they manage focus and overwhelm by removing unnecessary choice and decision. Steve Jobs famously wore the same outfit to work. He had multiples of the same turtleneck top and jeans. He never had to decide what to wear. A trait shared with many high-performing leaders. If you wear a uniform to work, you have a head start on this. But what else could you do? Perhaps plan your meals. Shop ahead. Decide, even label food each day. Then there's no decision needed. Next, automate where you can. Trying to remember everything also takes up a fair amount of mental energy. This is why we write to-do lists, why we have safety checklists, and why we leave ourselves notes and messages everywhere. The fact is, much of the stuff that we do, including the things that cause overwhelm, are fairly routine and almost certainly repetitive. So think about what you might automate, at work and at home. Everything from setting alarm reminders to doing online shopping lists to work top-up services. If you can find a way to not have to remember, take it. Your brain will thank you. Next, co-locating. Think about where stuff is, at home and at work again. Get honest for a minute. How much time do you spend looking for things, either because you can't remember where they are or because somebody didn't put them back after use? Keep things you use together in the same place. It saves legwork, thinking time, and a lot of frustration. At work, maybe have kit lists and systems for checking stuff is ready for use. I have a trainer's kit, for example. It contains a charging cable, various adapters for projectors and screens, a clicker for presentations, a few flip chart pens, some tissues, some plasters, and paracetamol. Ever the nurse. But seriously, it saved me from much inconvenience and more than a little bit of embarrassment when I would have otherwise forgotten something, not to mention the time racing around trying to find all the bits I need before I go. Remove temptation. When something's right in front of you, it's really easy to be distracted. And this applies to everything, to food, to social media, to people. So if you want to reduce your overwhelm, you need to design out as much temptation as you possibly can. If your mobile phone is in the next room and not in your pocket, you're much less likely to randomly pick it up and start scrolling. And while that might not always be practical at work, there are plenty of times where some digital downtime will reduce your overwhelm. For example, checking the work WhatsApp group when you're on your days off. The same applies to things like snacks. If you want to eat healthily, remove temptation. If you have to go looking for an item, you're less likely to unconsciously decide to eat it than if it's right next to the kettle. When you feel overwhelmed, it's often because your brain is trying to process too much red stuff. So to reduce the pressure, you'll likely fall back on habit, the easy option, and what feels familiar. If you're trying to make a change to reduce stress or overwhelm, don't rely on willpower. It's too difficult. Design temptation out of the way. Make it the harder option. Now think about what you might need to look at. The third is story. This is perhaps the most important step in moving from overwhelmed to ready. The things we say to ourselves are so powerful. They enable us or they defeat us, and we can be pretty unkind to ourselves sometimes. I've talked a lot about narrative on other classes, all of which applies here. But the key bit for overwhelm is that you need to have strategies for getting out of your head when you need to. Self-talk can be a really important part of our inner wisdom, our instinct if you like. It creates pause and stops us from diving into stuff that's potentially harmful. The trouble is, most humans have a negativity bias when it comes to this. We tell ourselves things that keep us safe, but not necessarily the things that set us up for success. Again, the more overwhelmed you feel, the more likely you are to be hard on yourself. If your self-talk is unhelpful, if you tend to catastrophize or make comparisons to tell yourself you're not good enough in some way, or you leave yourself feeling powerless, then you might need a bit of a reboot. Your neurochemistry is just as triggered by your internal dialogue as it is by external events, which if you're training and running empowering scenarios is great, but otherwise not so good. You might just finish up feeding the overwhelmed beast. Of course, you can use your self-talk to your advantage. Have you ever given yourself a little pep talk before doing something difficult? Or rehearsed a challenging conversation? This is about training for ready, not overwhelm. Ritual is really helpful here too. Think about ancient tribes or religious groups and sports teams, how they set up for battle, prayer and competition. And if you have a picture of the All Blacks in your head now doing their haka, you probably won't be alone. Not a rugby fan? Go look it up on YouTube, it's really powerful. So far in your life, you've survived 100% of the things that have been thrown at you. It might have been inelegant at times, you might not have always been at your best, but you're here. You've got skills. You need to trust yourself. Sometimes consciously overriding unhelpful self-talk with something more useful is enough, and sometimes it isn't. And when you're in the throes of a busy day and on the way to overwhelm, might not be the best time to practice. Train yourself to be ready by paying attention to your self-talk and make changes where you need to. But if overwhelm creeps up on you and you need to get back in control quickly, action is probably your best bet. Actual physical action uses up your stress hormone. It's what we were designed for. Now, you might not decide to run around the block, but getting up and moving, changing your physiology in some way, it helps your brain back from flight-fight, so you can distinguish between threat and non-threat. You can find the red stuff and ditch the rest. Then you know what action to take. A few months ago, I came home to a significant flood. Picture this. I opened my front door, confused by the sounds of gushing water. To my horror, the ceiling had come in at the bottom of the stairs. The carpet was wet. There was a centimetre or so of water on the wood floor. And as the water poured out of the light fittings, there was a gentle buzzing and crackling noise across the ceiling. Red stuff, right? My mind's racing. My feet are wet. I need to turn the water off, which is on the other side of the house. I need to turn the electricity off. I need to get towels to save the floor. I need a plumber. Oh my goodness, look at the mess. How do I fix the ceiling? Complete overwhelm. Actually, what I really needed to do was to prioritise. Which were the red tasks? And because I'm trained, not in floods and plumbing, but in prioritising or triage, I take a breath and I quickly go into sort mode. Turning off the electricity is my first red. That might kill me. Turning off the water is the second red. That'll prevent further harm. The rest is yellow and green. Well, actually, it turns out the poor old carpets were black. But do you see what I mean? Action is what brought me out of overwhelm, but only once I knew what to focus on. Focus is key here. When you hit overwhelm and you're trained to be ready, you'll be able to shift your focus onto the things that you have some control over, or at the very least some impact on, and away from the overwhelm. In other words, you'll be able to get out of your own head. Finally, remember what Professor Robert Sapolsky said. Every human action has a biological explanation. Overwhelm releases hormones that might get you out of mortal danger, but it won't help you to think straight. Use your biology to help you. Connection, compassion, and helping all release hormones which help counter stress. They expand your mental bandwidth and they help you feel more at ease. So instead of battening down the hatches, withdrawing, and thinking that you need to do everything yourself, try connecting, helping, and letting others help you. We've covered a lot in here. The key to surviving overwhelm is preparedness. And preparedness in this context is about training to be ready for overwhelm. You'll experience it differently, and it's much easier to get back from. Your next steps. The better you know yourself, or pay attention to what's happening and how you feel, the better you're able to craft the experiences you want. So take stock of your overwhelm. Where does it creep in? What does it look like? What are the common threads? What will help you the most? Train for ready. Sort, simplify, and check your stories so that you're giving yourself the best possible chance of success. Focus only on what you can impact and ignore the rest. Good luck.